Make sure you get all three of them. You'll pay attention to that detail. Going back, you mentioned what you wear. What you wear matters to the point where it shows you had some forethought. You were deliberate in what you did. One time we had a person show up wearing, it was let's say a chef's outfit. It was like there's food on it. And the guy tells us, I had today off. Boss called up, said, Joe called in sick. You're our only hope for keeping the restaurant open today. So he went to work and he goes, I stayed at work as long as I could possible till I could come here for this interview. We gave that a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of person that we're looking for. That's grit right there, that you stuck with your employer, like helped them out in their time of need. You were that service above all, that's teamwork. And you had the courage to show up with what you were wearing. Like, we get that. That is grace to a person who's showing up late to a test.
Yeah.
That I mentioned earlier. So that's why dress matters. It sets your mind up for this story that you're going to tell. Because the first question we ask, which is the first question I think of in any interview I've ever heard of, is somewhere along the lines of, maybe framed differently, but why are you here? And what have you done to prepare yourself for this career field? Mm-hmm. That's going to be, if that's not number one at every location, it's got to be in there somewhere that's what we need to hear from you. Because we can read your resume and look over any of the other application questions, supplemental questions that happen. But this is your time to tell us a story. It's not a yes or no answer. They are open-ended questions for a reason, to elicit from you what you think is important that we know, to get to know you better. So that first question of why are you here? What have you done? A bad way to answer it is, I've always wanted to do it. And leaving it there. A good answer is, I've always wanted to do it, and here are all the things, tracing back to my kindergarten years to the moment I'm sitting here. I did these things. I went to the military. I went to college. I went to work at the family farm. All of those things occurred. But here's how this path has got me where I'm at today. And that sets you up for the next 12 questions.
In a lot of ways, that question is an icebreaker to relieve some stress. There's nothing easier for a person to talk about than their self. There's no surprises in that question.
You know all
Why
the
are
answers.
you here? Yeah. Some of the questions can be really tricky, and they're real thinkers. Why are you here? Not a tricky question, not intended to be. Tell us about yourself. Why have you chosen this career? Why here? Why do you want to be a policeman? Whatever. They're icebreaker questions. It gives you a chance to talk about the easiest thing for you to talk about, myself, and to go into some depth. It's okay to elaborate. You don't want to ramble on and on like I tend to do, but it's okay to say, I grew up in this area. I graduated from high school at this place. I went to college and did this thing. I did this sport. I do this for a hobby. I got married when I was 22. I have a couple of kids. We enjoy this. In fact, we just went on vacation last week to Disneyland. It was a great time. And I have always wanted to be a police officer because, or maybe I haven't. Maybe it's more like what I was doing. I haven't always wanted to be a police officer, but here's why I'm here today. I recently was recruited by some people who thought I would be okay at it, who thought I would be good at it. I think I have the skills for it, and it's okay to brag on yourself. There's a humble way to brag on yourself, to say, this is why I'm here, and this is why I think I'm good for this, and to be a little bit vulnerable and open yourself up to who you really are. Because while I don't sit on those interviews, I do have an opportunity to sit at the final stage interview, the command staff interview. And the best interviews, the standout interviews, are the people who you get to know just a little bit by the end, because they open up to you. They're not giving canned interview answers. And, I really want to help people with no explanation. I've always wanted to do this. My grandpa was a policeman, and I've always thought it was cool. Like, they're building on that. By the time they're done, you know who their grandpa is, and you love this man. Like, those are the best interviews, because we are in a business of communicating professionally. Everything we do all day long, we carry lots of tools, we drive cars, we have lots of technology, but at the end of the day, we are standing in the room of a stranger, i.e. this interview room, Flash forward 1 year, you're standing in the living room of a stranger who you've never met, and you're in their business giving them advice, or you're telling them why they're derelict. But one way or the other, we are professional communicators, and how you do that matters. And that's why the oral board is important. And that's what you have an opportunity to do. And so there, you can ramble, but don't sell yourself short. Brag a little bit about yourself, open yourself up.
Watch for some cues from the interview panel. You've mentioned rambling a couple of times. I've had the fortune to sit across the table from people that have rambled on and on. Be clear, be concise with your answers. At some point, I'm done writing. I'll put my pencil down. I'll sit back in my chair.
So here's what he's doing. I had been a police officer for 12 years when I applied to lateral over to the agency I work at now. I knew Sergeant Watson before I moved agencies. I did not know him well, but because our agencies are close together, I had opportunity. Our jobs overlapped some. And so when I came into my oral board interview as a lateral candidate, now this is an in-county, same county lateral candidate, I would say that there's less stress, less pressure than an entry-level candidate. I already have a job, and I'm just looking for to move to an agency that has more opportunities, more potential for growth and promotion and things like that. And so, but at the end of the day, I have a job. And also, while I don't know the people on this panel, I know Sergeant Watson, although he was Officer Watson at the time, Corporal Watson at the time. And I know of him, and I know of the other officer that was on the panel. And so that does alleviate a little bit of the stress. And so in my interview, I have had a very good, very blessed career of 12 years. I've done a lot of things at this point, and so I have a lot of stories to tell. And so maybe I'm rambling now. Maybe that's what you're saying. But what I find, and you probably find, is some of the answers get repetitive. Like, you don't know the next question. So I don't know that question 6 is going to give me an opportunity to tell a story. And so in question 3, I find a way to tell this story that I think is a good story, or is a way for me to say, here's the skill I have, here's this experience I've had. And then here we are in question 6, and I'm like, and I'm making up the numbers, but I'm like, well, like I said in question 3, and then a little bit of it is repetitive, but at some point, I'm in this interview and we're deep in it, several questions in, and the questions for laterals, they are different. And so I'm deep in this interview, and I see Corporal Watson taking notes, and he sets his pen down, and he sits back like that there. And I took that as a cue that I had answered that question to his satisfaction or dissatisfaction, but that I was done answering that question. So I rounded it out. That's the subtle jab he just made at me. Please proceed. So you sit in on these interviews. You see a variety of candidates come in, and we've talked a little bit about what it means to sell yourself, but you've also seen people who, from the background material you've been provided, who have lots of background in military and job experience, and people who've gone through life, who've seen stressful things, and then are asked, tell us about a time you've gone through something stressful. And this is someone who's had military deployments and things like that, and they just can't come up with an answer. And so talk a little bit about some of the answers that fall short or lack depth.
That first question has a part about law enforcement training or any training experience in education, and people will say, well, I have none. That not a good answer about any of it. Just, I don't have that experience or none. And I've seen people that have worked in law enforcement agencies, not as a police officer, and they just say, I have no experience. Blows my mind away. We ask questions that are related to our job. One of them being stressful type situations. And one time in particular, I remember a gentleman, had been in the Coast Guard for a handful of years. And we're going through the questions, and about 7, 8, 9, we're way, halfway through this. And he's mentioned Coast Guard a couple times of doing stuff. And I said, okay, maybe he didn't do a whole lot in the Coast Guard. I don't know. We get this question about stressful situations, and he pauses for a bit, and he's like, well, there was this one time, and he proceeds to tell this story of a harrowing rescue up in Alaska during a squall that had come up, and a stranded fishing boat and high seas, and having to rappel down to this disabled boat, and while telling all the things that he had to do to coordinate with his crew members. And it was one of those where I think I probably put my pen down just so I could focus and listen to what this story that was transpiring in front of me. Like, yeah, that qualified for sure. And on the flip side of that, sometimes some people have jobs or just life experiences that they're like, I've had a blessed life. Like, nothing's been so stressful. That I don't know how anybody has gone through 20 plus years of life and not have something that was stressful. But there was a gentleman that came in. He had a great Texas accent. The guy would probably give you the shirt off of his back. We ask him, he's not doing so well in the interview up to this point. Regardless, we ask him about a stressful event. He responds that he was putting some metal sheeting, some tin, up on the side of the barn. And the wind came up. And he just stopped right there. And so, curious as I was, tell me some more about what happened. In my mind, I'm thinking I'm not catching. I don't work on a ranch. I don't know. You got to tell me. We don't know this. Tell us. Well, the wind came up and you can't put tin up. So we stopped. All right then. Thank you much.
That story makes me think of this. If you've ever been in a classroom setting or at a work training or in a whatever, sitting around a campfire, there's nothing better than a good story to make a point. And so whether it's you're trying to illustrate a point to your kids and you can draw from your experience, or you're teaching a classroom of people something, a story will often get the point across better than a lecture with nuts and bolts. And that really is, for me, what it comes down to in an oral board interview. In any interview, if you can draw from experience and tell a story well, those interviews are going to push you out so far ahead of the pack that you just can't even believe it. And so what your friend from Texas, who didn't sound like he scored very well, he really probably did have an interesting story. He just didn't tell it right. And we can't grade you on something you don't say out loud, right? In your head, you're going, well, Texas, maybe it was a tornado, maybe, who knows? Why was the sheeting important? What were we protecting? How much wind are we talking about? There's so many questions. And that might have actually been he thought enough of it to tell it as a stressful event, but he didn't lay the foundation. Like, what does this farm do? Here, we have this farm, we have this livestock, we have this crop, and this tin is critically important to keeping our livelihood intact. And the wind, I can see it, like we're on the plains of Texas, and the wind is kicking up. This dust storm is on its way and it's approaching, and everyone's scrambling, and the neighbor from across the way has come over and he's brought these sheets, and we're putting them up, and they're like sails on a schooner as the wind starts to whip, and it's everything we can do to keep them up, and we get most of them intact, and we're able to save Granny's farm. Like, there's might be a good story in there. You just have to tell it.